All right, everyone, welcome to our AI 101 speaker series. This time we're going to have, well, first of all, let's all introduce ourselves. So we are Coda Wish. So we should all introduce ourselves first. Uh, Faith, we can start with you.
Hi, I'm Faith Cheung. I'm a rising senior at Richard Montgomery, and yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Philip Wong. I'm a rising senior at Centennial High School.
Hi, my name is Justin Wang. I am a junior now, and I go to Winston Churchill High School.
Hi everyone, I'm Iris Guo and I'm a junior at Thomas Wooten High School.
Hi, I'm Lucy. I'm also a junior at Winston Churchill High School.
Hi, I'm Audrey and I'm a rising junior. I'm a junior at Montgomery Blair High School.
All right, well, today we're going to listen to Michael Kanaan talk about the future of AI and its realities. So Mr. Kanaan is a director of AI and machine learning activities on behalf of the Deputy Director of the Air Force Intelligence. He also recently published his own book, T-AI, which explores the realities of AI's impact on our future. If you guys have any questions during his talk, please use the Q&A function to ask questions, because it's much easier for us to see your question instead of like putting in the chat. So without further ado, Michael.
Oh wait, one more thing,
okay.
Justin, sorry. Okay, and also as you can see, Michael is an author of T-AI, and we actually have 10 copies of his books that we want to give out to you guys for free. And so at the end, we're going to be doing like a little Kahoot thing on what he talks about. So make sure you join at the end for like a little trivia to win a copy of his book, T-AI. It's very cool, and yeah, you definitely want to have it. So definitely listen during the talk and keep in the information for the trivia at the end, but this will end at 6 still. Okay, and yeah.
Without further ado, Michael.
Cool. And let me just tell everyone here, and I can't see all of you, but how inspired I am by you. It's Friday afternoon, and we're on a call talking about artificial intelligence and why it matters to all of us and the differences it's going to make in our lives and the way that we can talk about it so that we can convince people that this topic matters. So you, and I'm talking about your generation, because I'm starting to get a little bit older nowadays, can start seeing the world in the way that you want to see it. And make no mistake, AI is going to affect a lot of it. So I thought maybe that we'd start off talking a little bit about my history and my path, because it wasn't entirely long ago that I was just like you. I grew up in Michigan in a single dad household, right? And I was the oldest kid with a younger brother and sister, one who just graduated from the University of Chicago, and he's going to the Booth School of Business starting, I think, in about a week right now. And then a younger sister who's also in Chicago. She's worked at places like Nordstrom and all sorts of other cool places. And it was then growing up in this really tight-knit family that the greatest lesson that I was lucky to learn was that you can't always reopen doors. When an opportunity comes in front of you, you learn over time that you can't always reopen it, and that you should try to walk through that door, at least to never wonder, what if? What if is always the worst piece. And when I was about 16, 17 years old, trust me, the furthest thing on my mind, truthfully, was computer science and technology and programming and AI especially. It's not that old. Think about it. For everyone on the call now, you're the experienced ones. If you're talking about AI in today's day and age, which we'll talk about in a little bit, you're the ones with the most experience, because you could only have been really doing it for the past, 6, 7, 8 years since it came out of its last winter. And we see AI all around us when we put bunny faces on our faces on Snapchat or TikTok or our Google search algorithms, or the reason we see the ads we see every day, or sometimes the concerns that we have and the fake information that we read. So I had an opportunity when I was about 17 years old when the Air Force Academy reached out. And I grew up in the North. There's not a lot of military in the North. In fact, I'll be honest with you, I never met anyone in the military the entire time. I had no idea. But the Air Force Academy called and they asked if I would play football for them. And back to that point that I was making to say, you can't always re-walk through a door, I took it. And I went to Colorado Springs, where the Air Force Academy is, and started those 4 years as a business major. And over the course of that time, being a business major, you started to learn, hey, maybe I need to do a little coding because I can make my life better, or I can see something different that I could have never seen before. And it started with that passion of lifetime learning and being passionate about what that's all about. I think when you see the world change around you, which we're certainly seeing in 2020, we realize that learning is a team sport. It's something that the young and old should do alike and together. So I was at the Air Force Academy. I played football there. Business major, I minored in Japanese. And what I learned there was that learning matters, and I got inspired about the topic of artificial intelligence. So the one lesson I learned in college was always try to learn, because you can never know what's going to come in your future. Upon graduating, and this is what happens when people graduate from places like West Point or the Naval Academy or the Air Force Academy or Coast Guard Academy, I entered into service as an intelligence officer. My first job was going to a place in Dayton, Ohio, called the National Air and Space Intelligence Center. So this place is the world's premier location where the Air Force does all of its intelligence, with 3,500 people working there on all sorts of cool projects, whether that's in space or related to fighter jets or our satellites and everything else. And my first job was an interesting one. We've all heard about our unmanned aircraft up in the sky. And we had a camera that could see the world through more color bands than you and I can see the world through. You and I on the phone as humans now, we see the world through 3 color bands. By the way, a mantis shrimp, and this is a previous University of Chicago essay question for application, by the way. What does the mantis shrimp see that we do not see? Because the mantis shrimp sees the world in 8 color bands. So you can get quite philosophical about what the mantis shrimp sees that we do not. But we could see in hundreds of color bands. And our job was to protect soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen alike in Afghanistan on the streets driving convoys. And we could protect them from bombs. And that was something that was really important and also meant something. And I had mentioned before, I never grew up knowing the military, but this was my first assignment in public service. I want to highlight that point of public service right now. And serving others became this incredible passion. Now, by the way, this is in 2011. So I don't know what you guys were up to in 2011, but I had just graduated college. And we were out there, and our responsibility was to keep these military members safe. And at the same time, Dr. Fei Lee out of Stanford had launched the ImageNet competition. You can look this up. The ImageNet competition was for computer vision. And the competition was, can computers see better than humans? And for the longest time, nobody believed. Everyone said, well, that's not real artificial intelligence. But in 2011, it could do better. It could find more cats on the internet. And we as a small group of people sat back and said, wow, could we use this to protect Americans over in Afghanistan? Could we do better with that? And that gets back to this idea of how do we serve others? And the lesson that I learned in my first assignment at the time was serving others means something. Public service is a good thing. So did that job for a few years, then ended up moving on to a place called Air Force Central Command, where I was the director of targeting against ISIS. And if we can think back to 2015, this was a serious problem for us. It was something we wanted to make sure that we protected again Americans in the Middle East, and that we protected people's rights to human dignity and everything else. And that kind of led into this idea of keeping the idea of, if we could use artificial intelligence for good, to see more than us as humans could see, that would be a really good thing. And we had a number of initiatives that helped with this cause. Today, we don't talk much about ISIS, although we still should. We should still talk about rights in the Middle East and pay attention to it as a populace, even though I know we're distracted right now. And I was lucky, and I moved up to the Pentagon because of that assignment. And I spent 4 years there and ended up chairing artificial intelligence at the Pentagon. Now the Air Force, this might surprise you, and in government, they have all the same jobs we have in the normal world. You think of fighter pilots, and of course we have them. You think of intelligence officers like myself, but we have lawyers, we have doctors, we have people who pay attention to human resources and do budgets and everything else. So it's a big enterprise. It's 650,000 people. And our job was to help bring machine intelligence to them. And the lesson that I learned there is that the best leaders, the best people, what you guys will be one day, take needs from the cues of the ranks, from people that you get to lead, people like yourselves, who, by the way, in the Air Force, 88% of them are millennials. And I know that sounds old to you, but to me, that's my demographic. But we have 18-year-olds, we have 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds. What we wanted to do was make their life better. And then that instilled that passion. And artificial intelligence is a tough topic, and it's why I wrote the book. It's something that we all have to talk about. It's something that we all have to pay attention to. And most recently, I moved to MIT, where we have a new partnership here, where we make sure that we're being really transparent. All of the artificial intelligence that we build here is for a public good, contractually speaking. It's open, it's available, and we want to have the broadest conversation. Because as time goes on, we realize that while this technology could be really used for good, it can also really be used for bad. And just to close out there, that's a little bit of who I am. And I hope that, that you see that many of us go down these paths. You can never predict where you go, but it wasn't long ago, I was you guys on the phone. And it's nice to just be a part of this conversation with you.
So could you tell us a little bit more about your book, T-AI, and like what it's about, and maybe what inspired you to write it a bit more?
Yeah, I'm happy to, and I appreciate the question. I had mentioned that this is a conversation for everyone, and that we want to make sure that as your generation gets to see what you want into existence. And Justin, I'm a fan of starting with analogies. And if I could pick up the electrical outlet behind me, or maybe the microwave over in my kitchen, I'd probably bring it over here. Each of those on this call now, I think, probably have one of those in our house, or maybe even a hammer, right? We all have that. And for most of us, we're not electricians, but we use electricity, right? We're not engineers, but we use microwaves. Many of us drive cars, but fewer of us can build them. And then if you could build them, fewer of us could also code the software we find in our calls today. And all of us use hammers without being master craftspeople. And while we may not understand each of these things really intimately, I guess, really understand and be experts with them, they're familiar. And with each of these everyday instruments, we're incredibly effective with them. Yet that effectiveness can also do damage. And AI itself is a lot like this in certain ways if we don't talk about it. So I think the first and most important thing, something we all should recognize, because I believe we all have a role to play, even if you don't want to code, we have a role to play, is that AI is an extremely powerful tool. And it's just that, a tool. But it has far broader reach and implications that each of us want to make sure we evaluate and consider really carefully. It's like a sharp instrument. It shouldn't be too callously wielded, or we shouldn't just casually accept it. especially if it's in the wrong hands or when it's used for intrusive or oppressive purposes that we see happening throughout the world, back to the point of its reach. And there's serious issues. There are issues for everyone. And there are steps now that I think we all can take, particularly a younger generation. Education is what I care about most. I sit on the board of the American AI Forum, and making sure that we bring education to K through 12 on the topic of AI. Because we want to make sure that we, as a society, properly design and implement it in both our personal lives and our professional pursuits. So I think a lot of people will agree with me on this. There's a quote. Einstein's often attributed with saying, you don't really understand something unless you can explain it to your own grandmother. And I think it's true. But had Einstein known my own grandmother, I think he would have altered his words a little bit. He might have said, your grandmother is probably the smartest person you'll ever encounter. So if she doesn't understand your explanation, it's sure no one else will either. And that's it. That's what we want to get to, is we want to have a common explanation and dialogue, especially in 2020. We see how this is playing out. But the conversation that usually occurs, this disconnect, isn't because of complex technical details with your parents or teachers or other generations or some confusing computer issue. Instead, it's usually just because of the same old obstacles that stand in the way, regardless of the conversation. And even when it matters most in society, we're always speaking past, below, around, or through one another. And especially when we don't have an equal amount of information, a shared base of knowledge, the intent of the book, or a common set of experiences. Everyone has different experiences and everyone has different stories. So despite everything at risk, all the conversations, despite the fact that it's the reason you see the ads you see every day, it's the news that you sometimes read, it's the reason you see certain posts from your friends or posts that you don't want to see. Often the music we listen to, I'm a big fan of my Spotify, so I'm always updating it because the machine learning algorithm, and it's pretty good. You're always surprised on Discover Weekly on Monday morning. Or in the future, the fluctuation of the stock market and your 401ks as you get older, right? We can blame a lot of the stock market crash that you hear of, that perhaps my generation is still paying for in a lot of ways, on early applications of AI. But for most of us, it just remains shrouded by a cloud of mystery and misunderstanding. It's hidden behind complex technical terms and then confused even further by our depictions in science fiction like Black Mirror and Westworld and movies like that. So for most of us and a lot of our friends, they end up saying, that's not for me. I can't understand that. That's for those tech people. And I disagree. Much like electricity, cars, microwaves, hammers, it'll be a part of our lives. And its current state, the way things are as we speak, will profoundly impact our lives and interactions with the people we're with. So when I wrote the book, I thought about books that meant something to me. They're books that not only brought a topic to light, but a topic to life. And we all have those books. For me, it was Sagan's Cosmos, Hawking's Universe in a Nutshell, Sean Carroll's Something Deeply Hidden that recently came out on quantum mechanics, and Noah Harari's Sapiens. It's a topic we need experience with, familiarity, and understanding, and it's not just for those engineers. It's for all of us. We can all talk about it, and we all have an important role to play. So in the book, I explain the realities of AI from a human-oriented perspective that's easy to comprehend through our collective history of innovation, technology, because the topic's multidisciplinary. You have to know a little bit about our evolution, our language, the scales of numbers, all languages, by the way, the scales of numbers, both big and small, some basics of history, how a computer works, of course, also how your own brain works, the biology side. Then let's talk about what is AI, neural networks, and all of the other technical jargon. Because without context, it's the same circular conversation that we spoke of earlier. And that's how I broke up the book, part 1, part 2, and part 3. And in part 3, let's talk about the big stuff, the global implications of AI and the vulnerabilities at hand, both internationally and of course in business. And they're already exposed and they're squarely on the table. For a lot of countries, AI has already become an all-purpose tool to impose authoritarian influence around the world. Countries like Russia are weaponizing AI through its military and now aggressive efforts to disrupt democracy by whatever means possible. And other nations, ones that we get to have Zoom chats on the call and talk about whatever we want, American like-minded ones. We're paying attention to these new realities as well. But ultimately, the paths and the responsibility you and I have on the phone right now, the things we elect to follow, that is nations and your future businesses and schools and everything else, they echo the political foundations and moral imperatives upon which we are formed and the things we value, like free speech. But in order to talk about any of those aspects in a meaningful way, we need all legs to the tripod. And ultimately, we learn best through storytelling about what makes us, us. And for me, the human experience, the best stories, the same stories that are in If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, as in T-minus AI. It's all about telling the human experience, and that's best told through the lens of AI. So it's true, you know, as a personal hero, I mentioned the book, as Carl Sagan once said, if you wish to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe. I think the same goes for talking about AI. That's why I wrote the book.
It's very interesting. So I know you work for the Air Force. I was just curious, to you, what is the most exciting AI development you see coming in the near future, or even the far future? What are you most excited for?
Ooh. Okay, two things I think are pretty cool. Have you played, I don't know, I bet people on the line play StarCraft and Dota and everything else, right? So there's some, yeah, you're like, I'm tracking. There's a technique called reinforcement learning. This is the biggest advancement in artificial intelligence. We always build artificial intelligence on games. And the reason we build AI on games, back to the point that everyone can talk about this without needing to code, is games best represent us. They best represent the most imaginative minds in the world. Chess masters, Go masters, right? And nowadays, Dota and StarCraft players, right? These games are way more complicated than Go and chess. Now we're building AI on them. So I think there are a lot of advancements happening in the world of reinforcement learning for games. And I think that you'll see how that will play out into everyday life. And here's a way it is playing out in everyday life. I don't know if, you can Google this, I hope that you do. From OpenAI, who created the algorithm of the Dota 5, who plays that game and now will win every single game against the best human players in the world, who make hundreds of thousands of dollars, of course, right? They have GPT-3. GPT-3 is a language generation model. They spent a lot of money on this. They actually got the entire catalog of the University of Michigan library and everything else, and it can predict language. And while an AI doesn't exactly know what it's saying, it totally makes sense. There's a lot of creativity and inspiration that comes into you putting in a prompt into this algorithm, and it'll make natural language from that. So I'm excited about what we can do with it, right? Now, here's the one issue. What I just mentioned, everything about AI, and this is why it's important to have sociologists involved, teachers, biologists, chemists, psychologists, everyone. Whatever you're studying, you should know a little bit about AI, because there's a duality. So when I mentioned that language generation model, what are we concerned about? Fake news, computer-generated content. The question, we don't know what's real anymore. That really concerns me every day. And it's something that we really have to pay attention to. In addition to that, when I talked about building it on games, where it can start solving complex problems, well, I'm certainly worried about if they can use that kind of information and use that approach to game out international conflicts, right? And use that against us. or the advancements in computer vision, where we can track and locate people who might just look a little bit different than us. And throughout the world, this is happening. Countries like Venezuela, countries like China. We should talk about these things, and we should talk about how it's ending up working out. And we should say, I'm not going to allow a political party to dictate a people. That's not our values. So as much as I'm excited about all the advancements, Justin, I'm also sometimes concerned that the same advancements can be used for bad. It's all about how you use this stuff nowadays.
So I think I want to go a bit more into like the possible negative impacts AI can have on our future. So I know there's been a lot of discussion around this already, but like, what's your opinion on AI's impact on the workforce? And like, what do you think right now is like the most viable job to pursue if you want to get into AI?
Ooh, this is actually very interesting. So I think it's important that we all have a little bit of familiarity about how we develop AI. Maybe know a little bit of code, maybe know a little bit of Python or Julia or R or something. I think that's going to be a necessity as we move forward in the workforce. But I want to talk about something a little bit different. Maybe talk about the humanities. So I work quite frequently with Silicon Valley, every single day, all of those companies. And the new rock stars, they're people who think about how to best use the technology and new ideas and new businesses that could come out of it. They're people who also talk about ethics and pay attention to, well, what is right and what is wrong. So right now, what I would say is, I think it's super cool if people who cared about the environment were trying to figure out how can we use AI for that. I think I'm a little concerned that as we move forward, if we're not talking about it and we don't understand it, then when we put, computer vision algorithms that can track your face in Walgreens and see when you come and go, that could become a really slippery slope, right? That we want to make choices right now. So a lot of the conversation is, my concern is, and why I'm talking about AI augmenting us, making us better to see more of the world, is I think that the conversation about AI and automation is sometimes too interchangeable. It's more like a Venn diagram. So AI is not going to replace people. Automation is going to replace people. And they contribute to one another. But I think what we should think about now is that how can I use AI? So if I'm a lawyer, how can I go digitize all of my case law? So the way that a lawyer works is that before they walk into a case, they get a bunch of precedent from previous laws, and then they talk about it, of how it should be applied to the new scenario in order to maintain the democracy and everything that we're founded upon, right? All of those ideas of rights. Well, nowadays, a computer can go through all of that stuff and then tell you the cases that matter to the case you might be talking about. And I would say that what we want to do as a society is maybe change the dialogue. Maybe say automation is going to replace people, so how do we better educate them? How can we help with public education so that they have a place in the future? Now on AI, the best places to start is to use it with your most expert, brilliant minds so that you get the minutia out of their life, all the stuff they don't want to do, the stuff that they can't go through all the Excel files or read everything in a single day. AI is really good at that. Obama said it best in 2016. It was in a Vanity Fair article, and they said, what's artificial intelligence mean to the future? And he had a pretty prescient response that I think is really cool. He said, maybe one day we'll stop doing a bunch of computer things. Maybe we'll start paying teachers better. Maybe we'll start paying stay-at-home dads better. That meant something to me, of course. Maybe we'll start paying artists. Maybe we'll get back to human things because we don't do enough human things right now. So I would say that I'm not going to count out that there's a job that's definitely going to be replaced in the future. And I'm also not going to say that, you know, there's a best job for it. Of course, you know, going through the Google certification process that's open and available right now will, of course, make you a lot of money in the future. But it's all about what we're doing with that stuff. So I'd pay attention to, how does AI affect what I care about? How can I use it in the environment? How can I use it in biology, chemistry, or something like that?
So there's also something I heard in your talk I was just a little bit interested about. I was just curious, what made you want to minor in Japanese?
I was lucky to be one of the very few fortunate people to live in a really great school district, and they offered that language when I was about 6th grade. My brother speaks fluent Mandarin, and you know, I was a kid. I watched Dragon Ball Z. I loved anime. I thought it was cool. I wanted to do business. I was a business major. I'm like, Japan, technology, business, all of that jazz. And so I was lucky and I minored in Japanese. I don't think I have it quite the same anymore, but I actually got to use it the other day working at MIT here. So I was pretty excited about that. And I would say there's a famous quote for everyone listening on the line. I think you can use it in your personal life and for foreign languages. The limits of my language mean the limits of my world. Like, how profound, right? We see this play out every single day when we're not speaking the same language with people of different experiences than us. We should strive to speak the same language. So it's always important to learn new languages, literally and esoterically.
So in the next 5 years, what area do you think AI will grow the fastest? Like in terms of like healthcare or military or like in the home?
I think in the home. So Philip, are you really frustrated by Alexa? Sometimes I yell at Alexa. I tell her to change I'm like, why am I yelling at you, Alexa? Change the song. What's happening right now is there are a number of advancements at the biological level that are happening in natural language processing. So for people who are not familiar, natural language processing is our ability to predict and communicate with machines in everyday language, whatever language you speak, Japanese or English, or Mandarin or Arabic or Farsi or something like that. So the Alexa, Siri hasn't worked so well. Google Home, it's not so good. But let me tell you one of the most exciting things I get to work on every day, and how you see research play itself out in technology. A lot of the way that we develop technology programs are on the ways like mice see the world, right? What we found out is that mice actually don't look at objects. You and I see objects. I see the computer in front of me, right? I see your headphones and everything else. Mice only look at textures. So what's ended up happening in the way that we develop is we've learned that some of the neural network interconnections might be a little bit different as we grow them out. So a big emphasis is on bridging this gap of making sure that the research most resembles the way us as humans learn, right? So in natural language, it's very difficult to predict the next words because you have an awesome memory. You can remember what happened yesterday. A machine always can't do that. It gets its objects wrong, right? Back to this object conversation. It never understood, what object are you referring to? Is it a noun? Is it an adverb? Is it a pronoun? So it gets all mixed up. And that's why Alexa doesn't work very well. But because we've done so much in R&D, I think over the next 5 years, what you're gonna find out is that it really works well on your phone in us communicating with machines. And then in addition to that, the rise of 5G is really, really important, because to do AI, you need a lot of compute power. So the reason you play games, we talked about Dota and StarCraft, and like real games, we'll talk about like, you know, Jedi Front or whatever that's out right now. They need a lot of that thing called a GPU in your computer, right? You're always like, more compute power. Well, because of the rise of 5G, what we can end up doing is sending information over to big warehouses that can do all that computer stuff really, really fast, so that when you hold up your phone, I can't ever put a GPU in this. Never gonna happen, right? But now if we can send all the compute there and you get it back instantaneously, you'll see a lot more AI in your house.
So someone in the audience had a really great question they just asked. It's, how well equipped do you think our government is to deal with technological and AI related issues? Do you think some of our legislators are out of touch?
This is an interesting question. Because you're kind of asking me that question, right? In a funny way. No, so here's the reality. Remember when I mentioned that quote, the limits of my language mean the limits of my world? Here's something I've learned over the past decade of doing this, is that what you want to do is team the techniques of the old. Your parents tell you something because they experienced it once before, right? Even though we never listen, and that'll never change, right? Sometimes I don't listen to my dad. They are telling you because they experienced something similar. So their techniques are awesome. And what we want to do is team that idea with the ideas of the new, the things that we understand. So make no mistake, what the innovator's dilemma is, and you guys are all innovators dialed into this phone call now because you see the world differently, right? You're like, oh, I could do that a little bit better, or just a little bit differently that more matches what I understand. That's innovation, simply put. We still need to speak their language, right? We still need to communicate and help them understand what we're talking about. And that was really the reason I wrote the book, was to help level set the playing field of how we talk about AI, so the exact reason that legislators and everyone else can better communicate and make rules and talk to us who care about society in certain ways more efficiently and more effectively and more clearly and precisely. We lack precision in a lot of our language. This gets back also to why I really care about public service. And that's why I don't want to go to the private sector. Someone has to take it on, and all of us do, to say, I want to serve the greater good. There's something bigger than me. And by the way, we can do well, right? Like on paper, by doing good. So I will say that I wouldn't throw the bathtub or the kitchen sink out the window and say that ideas of democracy don't stand anymore, or the way the founding fathers wrote the Constitution. I would say, though, that we need to stop putting square pegs in round holes and carve out some new square pegs. And it's us on this call who are able to do that. So I hope we carve some more square pegs in the future.
So there's a couple more questions from the audience. The next one is, how do you think AI will affect the future of our technology?
Well, I think anything, here's the difference in why AI works nowadays, is because there's a question, and I bet you've all heard this question: if a tree falls in a forest, does it make a sound, right? And outside of like a very philosophical conversation, so I'm really passionate about quantum mechanics right now. I think that's the most fun topic to read and talk about, because it actually talks about consciousness and reality. It's not as math-based as you might think. Outside of some really philosophical conversations, of course it does. The question we should ask, was something there to record it? And in our lives every day now, we memorialize, we record everything we do. We talk about how, you know, that thing that used to never have technology on it, now all of a sudden does, right? Little Alexas that hear you every single day. So I think how AI will affect technology, it will be in every single technology, every single one. Tape recorders, computers, tiny devices from Elon Musk in your brain, your cars. So if that's going to happen, then we actually have to understand how AI works. And what we want to do is take the responsibility on us to teach everyone else.
So another question, what AI are you planning on working on? And like, will you continue to help the Air Force, and will you make the Air Force drones autonomous?
Remember when I said autonomy doesn't mean AI? So to the answer of autonomy, there will not be killer robots. That is not in our plans. That is not in anyone's plans. Well, maybe other countries. But we do view the world through the lens of human dignity and human rights and the law of armed conflict, all sorts of stuff like that, right? Despite it all, and we can be frustrated. Look, we have a number of examples where AI doesn't work. Amazon hires old white guys more. That was public news, right? When you use AI, it's kind of like looking in a mirror, because it's only there to discover human patterns because we create data, right? So when it comes to what I think we want to do in government specifically, and this is, you know, a different conversation, is to make sure that it most represents the ideas of human dignity, rights, liberties, and the pursuit of, you know, justice, happiness, everything else. And we do see that in Westernized society. So despite all of our mistakes, which are inevitable, here's the difference. At least we have the conversation, right? In other places in the world, there is no conversation. There's no voice. There's no protest. And I think that's what makes us special. So for the pursuit of autonomy, I wouldn't call it that. You know, sometimes, you know, we use AI to make sure that we don't have, you know, redundancies in budgets. That saves taxpayer dollars, right? There's definitely a way that you can use that. So I think what's important is to be involved, to make your voice heard. I was on the Forbes 30 under 30 list, and we do a number of like hackathons for cities and try to help local businesses. So most of what comes with that is talking to local businesses, consulting with them. And we did a hackathon for the city of Detroit. Did you know that 40% of the city of Detroit does not have internet access? Like, could you imagine that? That's the role that we have to play. Because what I hope we do as government is to make sure we best represent everyone. Different walks of life, different demographics, different experiences, inner city, rural, whatever it is, suburbs, everyone alike, so that they are best representing themselves in data, because AI will affect them. And that's what I think we're focused on in government right now.
So someone else was wondering, how did you come up with the title of your book, T-AI?
Oh, okay, so I've never shared this story publicly, okay? When you're writing a book, by the way, 26 months. That's how long it takes to write a book, from the time you get an agent to a publisher. So Jane Distel is my agent. She was the agent for President Obama, who did Dreams for My Father. And then you get a book deal, and then you finish the book and all this crazy, crazy stuff. Originally, the title for this book was called Managing the Meteor. You can see what I'm thinking about in my brain, right? It's kind of esoteric. It's like big picture talk, but you got to make something that makes people read it. So one day my publisher called. They said, "We want you to change the title of your book." And I said, "Well, I hope I get to pick it." And they said, "You got a few days." And I was walking down the street. So I worked at the Pentagon. I would get off the metro at L'Enfant Plaza, downtown DC, and then I'd walk to 14th and U, which is where I lived at the time on U Street, right downtown. And I was walking past an AT&T store, and there is a clock counting down the release to the S10 5G. And I was like, that's it, countdown. And so I changed the title to T-AI. I hope that's a good question, because I actually like that title now. So it changed overnight. And by the way, for those of you, and I know we're going to get into the trivia for you, Faith, is the first words of the book are the countdown to artificial intelligence is over. And that's why I put it in there.
Thank you so much. That was such a lovely speech. I know we all definitely enjoyed hearing about his path to where he is now, which is really amazing. All the work you've done, it's really amazing to hear about. So again, in the last 20 minutes, I hope you were all listening. I'm sure you were. We're gonna be having like a small trivia session, a little Kahoot, just for
audio is found on the southeast side.
We're just going to be having like a little Kahoot for you guys to win a chance to get a free copy of his book, T-AI. All right, so I'll begin sharing my screen now. 1 sec, it's going to take a little bit. Anything else you guys want to say, you should feel free to say maybe now while I'm getting ready.
Well, someone named Matthew doesn't seem very convinced in the whole AI thing. He asks, why do we need AI and what can we do without AI?
Ooh, I like that. Okay, I can answer this. The question, I completely agree with you. I think that AI is not the answer to everything. You remember I said it was a tool. It's only good for certain aspects of our lives. Imagine it like this. What's the limit to our knowledge and the information that we have? It's my brain. And our brain is way more complex than AI. I'm willing to make the call that in our lifetimes, we will never see artificial general intelligence. And if I'm wrong, then we'll remember from this video. The point is this. The limit is that I don't know the knowledge and experiences in Justin's brain, or Philip's, or Audrey's, or Lucy's, or Iris's. I don't get to know that stuff. But when we put it in a machine, we can at least see patterns and connect information and knowledge. And then we as humans make a choice. This is still a human endeavor. And that's why you would use AI. Computers are good at things humans aren't, and humans are really good at things computers will never be.
All right, so thank you so much. I think it's time to do some trivia.
Let me share my screen. Okay, so you guys can all see the code and join.
You guys have never played Kahoot before, you gotta go to kahoot.it and enter the code here.
Oh, and I should be clear, the top 10 get a copy of his book. So it shouldn't be too hard to get top 10, but we'll see. All right, we'll just wait like maybe 30 more seconds, so make sure you get on. Oh, also while we're waiting, someone also asked if you could, like, would you ever take a chance with a private company? So if you just want to answer that really quickly.
I'm really into public service right now, so I don't want to go anywhere.
Understood. All right, maybe like 10 more seconds. All right, okay, I think I'll just begin now. So where did he grow up? Right, so yeah, he said he grew up in Michigan. That was pretty early in the talk. Glad most of you guys got it. Congrats, Matthew and Tony. I feel like some of these you could probably rule out. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, business was the correct answer. Congrats, Tony. So what proves this? It wasn't a little anecdote he talked about. It's okay. Okay, yeah, so it was when the computer found more pictures of cats online. I can see how you could mix like rainbows and cats, but that was cats. All right, congrats, Tony, still. So where does he currently reside, I guess? So yeah, he's currently at MIT, where he currently works. And even with quarantine, I think it's still pretty cool that he gets to live there and still be with all the students and stuff. All right. Tony, still okay. So why is he concerned about technological advancements? Right, so there are a lot of negative ways that AI could be used in the future. It's a valid concern, right? Oh, I'm just saying Tony fell. Okay, congrats, Eric. So like one of the quote that Mr. Kim was talking about. Right, so okay, the Kahoot thing had like a word limit, but the whole thing is that like you don't fully understand something unless you can explain it to your grandmother. All right, congrats, Tony, again. Right, so face filters are an example of AI, facial recognition. Congrats, Bobby. Right, so all of the above. Obviously, millennials, fighter plane pilots, lawyers, all. Yeah, it's not just like STEM in the Air Force. I mean, not just STEM, but like business, talking. All that. Congrats, Bobby. So again, this is about his book. What is T minus AI about? Right, so this one might have been a little harder, but he's right, what he said, like the countdown to AI is over. So it's explaining AI in real life from the perspective of a human. And it could like touch on the other ones, but it's centered around the idea of the first choice. Congrats, Bobby, still. So it's like something he follows in his life, like, yeah. Right. So once a possibility is null, don't try to keep opening it. Like move on to something new, basically. That's Bobby still. Right? Yeah, true. Congrats, Bobby. Right, yeah. Okay. Congrats, Bobby again. All right. So second to last question. Right, true. Nice one, Bobby, again. All right, last question. This one shouldn't be too hard. Right, so it reflects what we do as humans. The other ones, not so much. All right, and see our winners. Congrats, Bobby. Okay. All right. So we'll be sending out, well, I'll look at the names. If you didn't put your full name, you might want to put that in the chat so I know like who won. And then I'll email out for like addresses, etc. So I can send you a copy of his book. And I strongly recommend reading it. It's really, really cool. And it's a great conclusion to our AI 101 course. So again, thank you everyone for coming. We had such an amazing time hearing him speak. And in his position now, it's really great to hear about the work he does. And I hope it inspired you. So anyone else want to say anything?
So I want to thank everyone for coming. Also, especially thank you, Michael, for coming and talk to us. It was a really interesting talk. So follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Codawish. And if you guys have any more questions, you can email us at codawish@gmail.com. So I think that wraps everything up. I think if you're top 10, you probably want to stay a bit after to make sure you guys, get your prize.
Yeah. And do you have any last words, Mr. Kanaan?
No, honestly, it's just so cool that you guys want to be involved with this, and thank you, right? I can't wait till the day comes when you guys teach me all the things I don't know about.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, we had an amazing time hearing, and I hope we've inspired all of you, and we'll see you maybe doing something Mr. Kanaan does one day. All right. Yeah, feel free to go, guys.
Faith, Justin, Lucy, Iris, you guys are awesome. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming.
You can always email and call.
Thank you so much.
You know that.
We've really had a pleasure working with you. I hope we will continue in the future.
100%. Whatever you guys need, always here for you.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Happy Labor Day. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
Okay, should we wait for like?
I think, yeah, 10 people are left. I think it's the top 10.
Okay, yeah. So should we ask them to like send their address in the chat? Okay, maybe like email your address to Code at Wish.
Oh, okay. We have 9. That's kind of awkward. Pretty sure Bobby's missing.
Okay, well, you know Bobby, so you can just text him.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So if you're here to claim your prize,
Just
email us.
codeawish@gmail.com and we'll send it to you. Okay, I guess that's all. And also you guys all get one. Like Justin, Audrey, Lucy. Like I saved one for you. Okay. Is that it?
That's the correct email, right? I posted it in the chat. It's the correct one.
All right. Bye, guys.